Welcome to Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the meaning and the power of the most important story in business. The one that answers why someone should buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. This is the story that defines the very character and nature of an organization. At WordWrite, we call this your capital S story. In each episode of the podcast, we feature guests who have great insights on business storytelling, who can share their experiences and key learnings to help you and your organization do a better job of sharing your capital S story to deliver remarkable results. I'm really excited for our guest today, Jonathan Bernstein, chairman and founder of Bernstein Crisis Management. Telling your story in a crisis, I think, is one of the most important and also difficult things to do. And boy, Jonathan, he's got the bio to do this work. Let me tell you, as a self-professed internet nerd who's been online since 1982, has an amazing presence online, Jonathan. It just blows me away. He's kind of the A to Z guy of crisis communications. He's done everything from accounting to white collar crime. There's probably a Z in there too, Jonathan. Started out kind of like me in journalism, investigative journalism. I also did that in my early career, but wound up becoming a well-respected crisis manager. During your journalism career, you worked with Jack Anderson. That's pretty cool. That probably a lot of people listening to the podcast don't have any idea who Jack Anderson is. Google him. You'll be really, really impressed. Jonathan is the publisher of The Crisis Manager, an email newsletter that you've been publishing, well, you'll tell us how long. It's been a while, decades. Let's just put it that way. And I love the tagline for those who are crisis managers, whether they want to be or not, which is true of most people who find themselves in a crisis. They weren't expecting that. Jonathan's also the author of 2 books, his media training manual, Keeping the Wolves at Bay. I love that title too. Kind of says what it's all about. And he's also written the Manager's Guide to Crisis Management. PR Week one time said if you're in a crisis, Jonathan's one of 20 people that should be on your speed dial, which I think is a very impressive sort of appellation. And hey, listen, like a fair number of people who are in crisis management, Jonathan spent some time in military intelligence, right? So it's a good background. Jonathan, welcome to Storylines Live. Before we get into it, anything in your background that I missed that you think our audience should know?
No, Paul, I think you summarized it pretty well. From 5 years in the Army to 5 years as an investigative and feature journalist, and then the rest of the career has been in PR and heavily in crisis management.
Yeah. Yeah, we often in our firm, we call that the brain surgery of PR, not because we want to pat ourselves on the back, but because if you make a mistake, the patient's dead. It's a very high stakes game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We always ask our guests, Jonathan, about their own definition of the capital S story. And, usually the way I phrase it is of the 4 questions that I described. Why would somebody buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you? Which is most important right now for Bernstein Crisis Management?
Yeah, I would say invest in us, but not in the financial sense, in the sense of buying into the basic best practices of crisis management as a fundamental part of doing business. It's one of the reasons why we offer free 1-hour presentations to boards of directors on best practices is they're not aware of them. They don't teach this in business school for the most part. And once they're aware of that, then they start understanding why they will actually save money and avoid a lot of crises if they integrate this into their business instead of treating it as a additional expense, additional effort for which I don't have the time, which is often the case until an organization has been through its first crisis.
So true, my friend. We've known each other for a number of years, and we've had the opportunity to cross paths, and immense respect for what you do. Often think in our world that what we do in this part of our professional lives is like insurance, right? Most business owners would not operate their enterprise without having the proper insurance. Yet for some reason, the thought of proper planning and preparation in the event of a crisis doesn't seem to fall in the same category as having, insurance on the trucks or the building or
It's a very good analogy,
yeah.
or refusing to ever have any kind of medical diagnostic test because, well, I'm fine, I'll be fine, I'll fine until you're not.
Yeah.
And and that's what I think people miss a lot about crisis management. They think of strictly the firefighting end of it where we're
Yes.
reacting. But in fact, that's totally preventable 95% of the time if you
Yeah.
do the planning and training up front. That's like fire inspectors. That's the best analogy I've ever heard.
Mm.
Is one side is crisis response. That's the firefighters, and they get all the glory and the attention and the thank yous. But the
Yep.
ones who actually save you millions or even billions of dollars are the fire inspectors who come in and go door to door and look around, say if you move that barrel there, or you do this, or you train your people how to do this, you'll save yourselves a lot of heartache. And that's the whole front end of the business that has become more and more popular over the last 10 years as people wake up. It
Hmm.
used, it used to be that the first phone calls we got were always for breaking crisis. Now about half the time it's for planning and training, which says a lot about the American workplace in general.
Yeah, it does. And I really want to dig into that more with you, Jonathan. Before we do that, I gave your background a little bit, but from your perspective, how does your own personal story inform what you do on a daily basis? Why do you do what you do?
Um, I have 10 different artistic representations of Don Quixote on my phone.
Oh, I like that.
Okay. I have a tattoo on my upper right back of a knight on a charging horse. So if you want to know what drives me, that's my personality type.
Wow.
And I got that tattoo when I was 63, by the way.
All
And
right.
I don't have to worry about what it looks like when I get old. I'm already there. And the and I've always been wanting to fight the good fight. I've always wanted
Mhm.
to beat the bully. I was bullied a lot when I was small until I got into martial arts, and I hate bullies whether they be verbal,
Mhm.
emotional, physical, any of the above, or corporate bullies. There's we run a cyberbullying program for two veterinary associations.
Really?
American Veterinary Medical Association, and we actually just signed a contract this morning with the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association. And their members can call and get a free half hour with us, which is prepaid with the association, when they
Mhm.
have somebody bullying them online and
Boy.
want and want some quick advice about what to do. And that's what drives me. That's my story. Is there's a personality type they call a guardian.
Yes.
That's me.
That's
And
that's very cool. I've been told I'm the same sort of a guardian as well. Maybe
yeah,
that's
well,
what draws us to the work we do, right?
yeah, it is. And also, I mean, I'm also, even frankly, from a spiritual side, not a religious side, from a
Mhm.
spiritual side,
Yep.
really nourishes me to help
Yes.
others.
Yeah, me
And
too, brother. I'll tell
and
you
and,
what it is.
and so that's what's driven everything I've done. That's why I joined the army. That's why I originally actually signed up to be a military cop, but got recruited into military intelligence. But
Hmm.
all wanting to make a difference, wanting to be in a position to have just a little bit of power to help others.
Yeah.
And then investigative reporting, same thing. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, crisis management, you're making the difference whether an organization exists or not. I mean, that's what we often tell the lawyers when they want to know why we're involved. We're involved so that the organization stays alive long enough to pay your bill, Mr. Attorney.
That's right. Yeah, as we often say at our firm, you can lose your company in the court of public opinion long before you wind up win in the court of law, right?
Arthur
And
Anderson did that.
exactly, yes, yeah, and the whole Enron scandal some years ago.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, related to your own personal story, as uh, one of the top crisis communications managers in the country, if not the world. What's your view on storytelling? Obviously, we have this podcast and I gave my view, but how does storytelling in your mind fit into the work that you do?
There's a crisis management pro up in Canada named Mark Toohey, who says the communication has been successful when the desired result has been achieved. And to do that, you have to tell your story, whatever the story is, because if you don't tell your story, someone else is going to tell you for you.
Yeah.
And on the internet, that is the thing. Your story will be told. I mean, these calls I get I got a call from one of the veterinarians this morning. It's someone else was telling the story of how their pet got damaged at this veterinary clinic. And even though their story is total bull, unless the vet tells their own, the other story will stand.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
not only telling your story for proactive purposes, but it also creates a layer of protection. If people know who you really are, now, oh, that person couldn't have done what they're claiming. So it's part of, I always advocate proactive stuff to create
Absolutely.
a cushion of goodwill that
Yep.
gets you through crisis better, instead of the first time somebody hears of you is when somebody's complaining about you online. And so to do that, again, you have to tell your story proactively and reactively according to the situation.
Absolutely, Jonathan. It's such good points. We often use a phrase similar to the one you just shared, which is that you got to make deposits in the bank of goodwill. We worked with a crisis client some years ago that started a major fire in a downtown city that people with their cell phones were posting on the internet. And when we first met with the CEO, he was proud that you couldn't find the company on Google. Well, after the fire, you certainly could. And if they might have spent a little bit more time sharing their story before they had this accident, they might not have had the first 100 Google results after the fire be all about the fire and people saying what a bad company they were. They would have instead been giving people the full context, like you just said, so people could make a proper evaluation. There was this book that was written years ago, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And I'm sure you'll agree with this. It's a lot of the work we do. Bad things happen to good companies too.
Yeah.
But if you're not telling people you're a good company, they're not going to know.
And Robert Scoble, one of the gurus of the evolving internet, talked about the internet as the world's largest water cooler.
Hmm. Yes.
And everybody standing around the water cooler talking about everybody and everything, including you. So
Yes.
do you want what's being said? First of all, do you know what's being said about you?
Exactly.
And to know what story other people are telling in order to properly craft your story and make sure that it addresses any concerns proactively.
Yeah, such good points. And today, so many crises or seeming crises happen. They start online. They start out in public discourse, right? Can you talk a little bit about that from your recent experience?
Yeah, I'd say in the last 10 years, Paul, that we've had virtually 100% of crisis to which we've had to respond have an online component.
Yeah.
100%, always. Sometimes, probably half of those times, the problem exists entirely online, at least initially.
Yes.
And it comes usually from somebody who is unhappy, right or wrong,
Yes.
or it could be plaintiff's attorney,
Oh, yeah.
you know, because the old stand on the courthouse step, give an interview to the media thing has now evolved to launch an internet blitz. When you're ready to do that on plaintiff side, so you never know when that stuff is going to come, and which is why, and a big thing that people miss is that monitoring end of things and making sure
Um,
they're tracking what's going on.
yeah, Jonathan, such a good point. I have a call later today with a client. It's an industrial company. Now, your local coffee shop isn't any good. You might go on Google and check Google reviews. This industrial company had zero Google reviews, and all of a sudden they got two one-star reviews related to a crisis that they have ongoing. And I just, one of the first things we shared with them is, are you sure that's not somebody who works for a plaintiff's attorney who's trying to stir things up?
Yep. Yeah, they
Wait,
definitely go fishing. The other thing most people sometimes shake off and don't realize is that, like on Yelp, every half star you lose means a 15% loss in business.
wow.
That's hard stats. And we cite that in our best practices presentation along with the source that comes from. But it's like, wake up here. That's it may
Wow.
what's it worth to keep a happy customer instead of having that half star drop?
Do you think, Jonathan, to kind of piggyback off of that, that the increase you've seen in demand for proactive planning is related to that? You know, that people are seeing this happen to other companies and they're thinking, oh boy, I can't ignore this internet thing. It's not going to go
Yeah,
away.
yeah. And it's, again, it's kind of interesting as someone who's been a nerd all his life, and suddenly to see people wake up in the early 1990s and
Yep.
we can ignore it. I mean, in the early days of the internet, a very major company we worked with had to literally change their brand in the United States because of four bloggers who used to be salespeople for them trashing them, and the company choosing to ignore the bloggers. And so a $1 billion company had to go through a huge amount of expense to literally change its brand because they came in too late. At that point, it was, and I was part of the team that came in and said, "These guys have done so much damage. That name's trash for a long time now, and now they could have done even more." That was just when blogs were the only
Right.
social platform that was significant. And so now you can go. I mean, the veterinarian who called me this morning was already being trashed on Yelp, Instagram, and one other platform, and they did nothing wrong.
You know, when I got into the news business, and which is probably not too distant from when you did, we used to say the news cycle was just 24 hours. Now it's less than 15 minutes. If you don't respond to something online in 15 minutes or less, you could quite literally be trashed.
Yep. Yeah, it takes very little time. And when some subjects people pile on because of the emotion, again, I'll
So
use the example of the veterinarians, pet lovers, pet lovers, and it's wonderful. I'm a pet lover. But
yeah,
what a lot of them do online is they see one person complaining and they believe them verbatim, and then
absolutely.
they pile on that veterinarian without knowing anything. But they've then increased the findability of that negative news. Every time they add something, they're mentioning the company name again or the vet again, and that just Googling, it's hitting Google's algorithm every single time
Right.
they do that.
Love those algorithms. They see all those mentions and, they don't have any filter in terms of the quality of the commentary. They're just
Yeah.
going to continue to send traffic that way and heighten it. Folks, stay tuned. We're going to really dig into some of the very interesting work that Jonathan does in his firm. First, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back, folks, to Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the power and the meaning of the most important story in business. The one that answers why somebody would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. At WordWrite, we call that your capital S story. In this episode, we are honored to have with us Jonathan Bernstein, the chairman and founder of Bernstein Crisis Management, one of the top crisis communications organizations in the world. What I want to do now is kind of dig into the work that Jonathan does at his firm. So, Jonathan, we talked quite a bit about crises, but in your ideal world, how do you help your clients?
Ideally, we help clients avoid 95% of the crisis they're going to run into in the first place. That's the ideal.
I knew
How,
you'd say that.
However, most clients don't let us do that
uh,
until after they've been burned a time or two.
mm,
And so it's just, prevention is always way less expensive than, and from a both financial and reputation point of view than strictly response. But sometimes companies just don't give it the focus they need to give it until stuff's hit the fan.
Yeah, boy, that is for sure. A lot of times there was university research done decades ago that something like 95% of crises are predictable. I always think about the BP Explorer in the Gulf of Mexico. If you're going to drill for oil 10,000 feet below the surface of the Gulf of Mexico, don't you think a broken pipe would be one of the logical things?
You think? Oh, we've gone in and reversed engineered, if you will, how crises have happened many times now, and invariably we find some point where someone knew something
Yes.
I just don't want to bother the people back at headquarters or, oh, that'll never happen. We don't have to worry about it. Or we can jury rig something here. That'll work. And there's always a point where there's been not word has been known and has not been passed up the chain, or it's passed up the chain and they said, it's well, 5% chance that happened. Don't worry about it. It's kind of like when, pharmaceutical companies talk about, well, yeah, two or three people died, but it was statistically insignificant. Yeah, it's not a convincing argument.
No, it absolutely is not. It causes people to go crazy. Now, you've been in business for,
30
gosh,
years.
yeah. What led you to start the company?
When did I start it?
What led you to start the company
Well,
and when too? Sure,
it
certainly.
comes at the end of the day, it comes down to I don't play well with those in a corporate environment.
Ah, okay.
One of the reasons I got out of one of the big reasons I got out of the army after 5 years, because I really enjoyed my work, was
Mhm.
I knew I was going to tell some general officer what I actually thought. And as a young NCO, that was not a good idea to do. Even
No.
a young officer, it would not have been a good idea to do. And pretty much the same thing when I went to Reuter Finn. I love them. They were great. They allowed me to set up their crisis communications group for them. But at the end of the day, commuting 2.5 hours round trip was a big part of my motivation. I didn't want to do that anymore. And I would decided I would rather make less money if that's what was required in
Mhm.
order to be my own boss, only work for clients I want to work for.
There you go.
And that was a big part of it. And not have, not have to do all the corporate BS. That I was pretty good at my job, and 50% of my income though was from business development. They kept borrowing me to work on projects,
Hmm.
took me away from business development. So
Yep.
my income was actually going down my last year there because I didn't have the time. So I just said, no, I'll start my own shop in January 4th, 1994. That's what I did. And a lot of people said to me, you'll never make a living doing crisis management full time. Okay, if you say so.
You are. Yeah.
Yeah.
30 years later, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's like when I was 13 and my mother said, I'll never stick with guitar. So,
well, there you go. Now, folks, Jonathan and I have been talking about our respective musical interests. He's a folk singer. That's a good way to keep yourself sane when you spend the day putting out other
yeah,
people's
yeah.
fires,
You
right?
have the right brain stuff going too. Yeah, stuff like
That's right. And I also play in a band. I'm a bass player in a band. And yeah, music is good, good for the soul, but also a good distraction from, I mean, frankly, and you, as a crisis counselor, you spend time with people in some of the worst moments of their lives. It's really it can be very difficult and challenging work.
yes, there is a lot of hand holding involved. My personality is such that I lead with compassion usually, and we teach our clients you always want to come across as compassionate, confident, and competent.
Wonderful. I love that. Three C's right there.
VCs of effective communication in a
Mhm.
crisis or any other time.
Absolutely.
And you can't go wrong. If you don't deal with people's feelings first, they won't listen to the facts.
Before we took our break, you were talking about your work with veterinarians, and you mentioned that, people will glom on. That's that feeling thing. I mean, people are feeling for the animal or whatever. They may not even know the facts yet,
Yeah,
uh, and that's the nature of being human. We operate from that part of our being, right?
exactly. And so we tell the vets when you write up a statement, which we're always happy to review for them, start off with, we understand why you're upset. We'd be upset if we read a story like that too, but that story isn't true. Here's our story.
There you go. Well said. Now, there are a lot of people who claim to do crisis management, and I'm sure this has happened with you. At our firm, there have been a number of times when we brought in to clean up a mess that was started by somebody else, because this is absolutely, uh, for those of you listening, there's a lot of the marketing and PR world where it's all about awards, right? This is a very difficult area to apply for or win awards, because really success and I often say this, Jonathan, there ought to be an award for the best headline you never read. If a crisis counselor is doing their job properly, you're not going to know that there was a crisis. And ideally, perhaps it would have been avoided. Um, as you look at kind of what's out there in this field, what makes Bernstein crisis management different from people who would claim to be your competitors?
The level of direct service, amongst other things. We literally are available 24/7. If a client's paying for that, they get
Right.
24/7 service. And so, for example, on these hotlines that we manage, we also man hotlines for a couple of insurance companies that provide crisis management insurance, which is pretty cool. That's a new thing that's come on the market now. And they refer their clients to us. And, we say it rings at 2 a.m., we'll pick up. And we have a line that rotates to whoever's on duty for that hotline. And right now it's me, but when I'm on vacation, somebody else on my team will be on duty. So it's all about being highly responsive. It's number one. Number
Mhm.
two, you always get only senior level advice. We don't have account executives. We don't have junior account executives. We have people who at any agency would be senior VP and above.
Mhm.
You know,
I think that's we'll be putting this episode at some point when it's edited on YouTube, not right away. So you folks gonna have to wait to understand what I'm going to say next. But this is the one area of our business where people like to see gray hair. They want to know you've been around the barn a few times, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and had experience with as many different industries and situations
Yes.
as we have. I know we do regular training for a very big fast food company and do crisis simulation exercises. And it's one of the things that they like is we can simulate. We know, in fact, we did a crisis simulation for them a week before the recent hurricane hit Texas and affected
Wow.
them. And the simulation we did a week earlier was a Cat 5 hurricane hitting the East Coast. So
Wow.
we actually tested their plan, and then a week later they had to use their plan, but it just in a different part of the country. And so that's that kind of personalized attention, ability to adapt, quickly produce, and deliver services. The first time we worked with them, we had a week to develop and deliver an exercise, and we did. And one of my team went to New York and did training for this company, and so on. The other big differences, frankly, is pricing. We've run a virtual business and have for 30 years. We
Yeah.
don't have brick and mortar to support. So the top rates at the big agencies are going to be 60, 70% higher than we charge.
Hmm.
The crisis management is the highest paid
Certainly.
specialty, my knowledge, in PR, but our rates are still way lower than I'd be charging still if I was still at Ruder Finn or any of the big agencies or even in the big specialty crisis management shops. So that's the three things the personal service and availability,
Mhm.
certainly pricing, and our ability to be very nimble. We don't have a lot of people involved in our decision making.
That's great because in a crisis, you need to move fast. You don't want to be climbing through layers of bureaucracy or doing a lot of handoffs, right?
Right.
Uh, can you share a success story or two from your work? Something you're proud of that demonstrates the value of what you do?
Sure. So for about 8 years, Craigslist was my client,
Wow.
and, and and they hired me at the time that they were being dragged through the mud over still hosting adult services ads.
Oh, right. I remember that. Yes.
And they were trying to fiercely resist any direct, any attempt to direct them because they're very libertarian in their outlook and don't, we don't want government. But that was a losing argument. And because they had 13 state attorney generals after them and a congressional committee.
Oh, my.
That's when I got called.
Wow.
And I got screened by, I was one of several agencies they talked to, but apparently the reason I got hired is because I didn't, as Jim Buckmaster, the CEO of Craigslist, said, um, you didn't you didn't fawn on us.
No.
And I said, I don't fawn. You. And so anyhow, we got them ready. I took them to Congress. I got them ready for a congressional committee. and they did some big news interviews, and a major news network, when they interviewed Jim Buckmaster, we both overheard the interviewer afterwards saying, I kept trying to get him to respond the way she was just expressing frustration. He wouldn't say what I wanted him to say. That from a
That's
media trainer, a crisis media trainer's point of
that's
view, that's ultimate success. That's he got all his message points across, and he frustrated the journalist.
here you go. That is success, isn't it? Well, Jonathan, this has been a great conversation in this episode. We could obviously talk for hours. It's a very interesting area of work that most clients hope they never have to experience. But we often say at our firm, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Sadly, whether it's a cybersecurity crisis, which happens more and more often, or a social media eruption, it just seems it's almost impossible to avoid these things these days. Is there anything, any aspect of the work that we haven't talked about that you think the audience should know about?
I think that most organizations don't realize or think about the fact that every employee is a crisis manager for them, whether they want them to be or not. And so everybody needs to know what their responsibility is
Mm-hmm.
or is not, during a crisis. And that, so that at least some level of training needs to go out to everybody, even if the only thing that most people get is, if you're asked by the media or anybody else about a topic, all you have to do is say, I am not a spokesperson, but here is the spokesperson over here. And that's it. So, but if they don't do that, that's how you end up with, security guards giving interviews after a fire at a manufacturing plant. So you need to consider not just your leadership team, but everybody.
Well said, my friend. Well said. How can people best reach you, Jonathan?
Couple of ways. My phone number, 626-825-3838. The website is bernsteincrisismanagement.com, just like it sounds. And it's Jonathan at bernsteincrisismanagement.com as an email address. And I respond to all of those, and my phone number can be texted. And I'm always happy to talk to people about their potential needs, or if they've got a leadership team that would like a best practices presentation, we happen to do that on a virtual basis.
Wonderful, my friend. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me, Paul. I appreciate it.
You know it. Folks, also really glad to have you with us on this episode of Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the power and the meaning of the most important story in business, why somebody would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you, even in a crisis. See you next time.